There she is, World of Tomorrow. As illustrated by Kevin Conran, as directed by Kerry Conran, and as created by this group of tired visual artists who've been working hard.
One of the things that's really interesting about this film, it was like a brave new world of filmmaking. It was something that had never really been done before.
Our characters go literally around the world, but they actually never left that soundstage. And that is pretty amazing.
Thanks.
I think this film will definitely prove to the industry that we're there now.
Enemy warship bearing 316, Mark 4, closing fast.
I hope people bear this in mind, but we were a little independent movie. We were not a $200 million summer studio extravaganza. Paramount put in a lot of money at the end of the film that we really desperately needed and allowed us to do some great things we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, but we were on our own for a long time. We were a little independent movie on a big scale.
When I saw the short film, because Kerry originally had a 6-minute short version of him developing the technology and the way in which he was shooting it, and when I saw that, I thought, I'll do it, whatever it is. I hadn't even read the script, and I was like, I'm in, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Here we go. First team rehearsal, please. Standing by. So
obviously, it all starts with Kerry. It's, I don't know, 8 years or so ago, I guess. Maybe even a little bit longer, when he first came down to my place and sat down with my wife and I and said, hey, I got this idea for this thing, and I want you to be a part of it because I need what you can do, and help me with this, and let's do this thing. And Kerry's worked and dedicated his life to making a film virtually since the time he was about 14 years old, I guess.
Take 3, A mark. Action.
Give me a visual.
Launching radio imager.
I'd left Flint, Michigan, where I grew up, and came to CalArts. It was very early on something that I recognized as a school that sort of promoted and celebrated more experimental work. The other aspect of the school that was very significant in its influence on me was animation. And I was in the live-action program, but was surrounded by the animators. What was fun about watching the animators at CalArts, even as students, was that they were able to create anything. They weren't bound by the laws of physics that we were trying to, nor the budgets that we had. Anything they could draw, anything they could imagine, they could create. I wanted that same flexibility brought to live action with that same economy, and it was the computer that I saw as the device to facilitate that. Once I left school, learned very quickly that studios weren't going to hand me $150 million to make a film, or even $50,000 to make a film. So I started to take some of these techniques and set out to essentially make a film, but on my own. Kerry being Kerry, he wasn't really going to be content with sort of a talking head, little intimate drama in a room somewhere. It was going to be big. One of the first things that I did with him was work on the big robot that opens the movie. It didn't really exist at that point, and he had this idea for it. So I started to do a few sketches, and then he cobbled together an early generation of that robot on his own. He's not really a modeler, but he did a fair enough job with it that's what we used. His ability with a computer and his knowledge, led him to believe that he could take what was already existing out there in terms of off-the-shelf software and push it somewhere. And from there, it was, just take these incredibly long render times, just based on this little machine that he had.
This is it, behind the scenes. The miracle of Wonka vision.
I had helped set up several magazines and move them from essentially mini computers and mainframes over to desktop-based systems. And I was able to kind of do that either during the day or over the phone even while I worked on the film. The last thing was to recruit some of our friends, guys I used to work with, people that Kerry went to school with, and beg them to be actors in this thing. There weren't any, I don't think anybody had any lines. It was all just sort of posing and stuff. We shot them in Kerry's apartment against this blue screen. Eric Adkins was there, and he actually shot it.
I knew Kevin and Kerry, you know, essentially playing tennis with them and playing ping pong and things like that, very socially. And I guess probably about 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, they started telling me that they were working on this short.
Right now we're working on the exciting title sequence for the end. We're gonna wrap this thing up, take it out, and begin the parade of rejections. That's the plan. We were ready to take this thing out, and I think it was actually my wife that said, we should call Marcia and just have her come and take a look at it, somebody that's in the business, and just see if you guys are complete idiots and this is embarrassing or if it's okay.
They said, okay, well, we finished the short, and Kerry said, but I haven't finished the script, so I don't want to show you the short until I've got the script. And I said, oh, come on. I mean, you have the short here. You've been talking about this for 2 years. Let me see it. You know, I'm thinking I'm probably going to hate it, so it doesn't matter if there's a script or not, you know. I mean, because you never know. But anyway, we sat down, and he pushed play on this, and this image came up, and I thought, wow, this is cool. And then it kept going and going, and I mean, I finished watching the short, and I thought, what the hell was that? And then I looked at Kerry and I said, can I see it again? And he said, sure. And so he showed it to me again, and I kept trying to imagine how he had done this in his apartment, because it was huge in the scope of it. I knew that it was different, and I knew that it was cool, and I knew that I thought this guy could probably make an interesting movie.
So Marcia told us, don't do anything with it. I want to talk to Jon in the morning. And called us the next morning about 10 o'clock. We took off to Culver City and met Jon for the first time. I really intended to make the entire film. It was just after 4 years, only 6 minutes had been generated, so it was going to take me 20 years to finish the film. So when she suggested we go in and meet with Jon, it really, even at that point, was just a curiosity to me. I didn't really know how other people would react to it, particularly someone that had been making films for many, many years.
Kerry and Kevin showed up, and they had with them a kind of sheet metal case with straps around it. And inside the case was a foam, and then inside that was a video cassette with a cartoon-like figure, which is the old one sheet for Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow. And there was also a toy robot. So I have to say that was a first for me, receiving a video cassette in that form as well as getting a robot toy. So I put it in the machine and looked at it. I was really, really interested in what I saw. I think I might have looked at it one more time.
I saw a sincerity in his reaction to it, because he wasn't gushing. He didn't have any kind of sales pitch that would make you suspicious. It was a very, I think, measured response to it, but a very positive response in the sense that I think that he saw something there that I'm not even sure he quite knew what it was. After we watched the tape, he asked what I wanted, and I said, I just want to finish my film. And he said, I think we can do that. We never showed it to anybody else. He saw it, and he said, don't show this to anybody else. And we didn't. And so that's how that all came together. That first meeting in Jon's office was the result of Marcia Oglesby, who went to college with my wife. That was the connection. They were friends.
Joseph Sullivan. I was sure you'd be dead by now.
It's good to see you too, Frankie.
I had great faith in Kerry. I had great faith in our collaboration. And I based that faith on having spent 2 years working with him on the script, where he would write a draft and then I would have him come back and write another draft and make changes. And we had what I would call the typical kind of disagreements between a producer and a director. And ultimately, the way he resolved them, I thought was skillful. And I thought what he put on page was good, whether he did exactly what I said, which he did sometimes, or he did something different, or occasionally did nothing. But I felt that he paid sufficient attention to what I was suggesting that we actually had developed the kind of collaboration which is necessary for working with a director on any kind of film, and certainly one as complex as this. One of the fun things in working with a first-time director in a situation like this is basically I got to cast the movie. So I hired a lot of people I like, whether it was Michael Gambon or Bai Ling or Giovanni Ribisi. Just a bunch of really, really good actors. And I'd run them by Kerry, and he was most of the time sort of, as the Irish would say, gobsmacked. I mean, you really can get this person.
Oh, great, we all made up.
It sounded absurd to just suddenly be discussing these actors. It sounded silly, in a way almost like a game, that we dispense with this and then find these unknowns eventually and get to work.
He told me his ideas, and I said to him, I think it would be great Jude Law. And he went, you think that's a possibility? I said, yeah. It took a lot of chutzpah on a certain level to say, well, work for nothing. But that is not some trait that's alien to my corpus.
Action.
So, Frankie, how's that number 3 engine coming on? Last time I heard you were...
Loudspeaker. Your position.
When I first saw the 6-minute tape that Jon Avnet showed me, it absolutely bowled me over. I've never seen anyone who's used the technology we know we have at our fingertips in the computers this artfully, this gracefully, and with this much style.
Then I turned my eyes to the role of Polly, and I had met Gwyneth when she was quite a bit younger, and I'd always been very impressed with her both as a professional actress and as a person. So I mentioned, Gwyneth both to Kerry and to Jude, and they both lit up slightly different ways because Jude had worked with her and knew her. Kerry, like, are you kidding? I said, no, I think we could do this. Gwyneth is very, very confident in her beliefs. If she likes something, she likes it. If she doesn't, she doesn't. And she obviously has a very good relationship with Jude. So she read the script and she called and said she wanted to do it. And then I spoke with her agent, and at that point we basically came up with a rough form for what the deal would be. And I said, okay, Kerry, you got Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow in your first movie.
It's a strange kind of phenomenon that kind of like brought them to this project and brought us all together. I don't to this day know what to make of it, and I don't exactly know what they saw that made them take such a leap of faith on particularly someone that had never made a film, let alone doing something so unconventional.
All right, rehearsal up, ready, and action, please.
What?
I missed you. Thanks for saving my life today, by the way.
Oh. Were you down there?
This film being shot completely on blue screen, when you're out there, you have to know what's behind them to compose the shot. So it took an incredible amount of pre-production on this side of, the ocean before we went over there. We were going to do it very small scale over a long period of time, just with a small group of people and friends, and to work as extras. At that time, Gwyneth and Jude had signed on, and it was, a Jon Avnet thing. So it was a big movie, but we were still going to try and keep it as garage-oriented as possible.
The next step in getting this whole thing underway was really setting up the visual effects studio, which we did. And it was funny because the first step in doing that was to find a building. And so me, Kerry, Kevin, we would go to all these places in the valley, way out, and there were these beautiful, sound stages and these beautiful old warehouses that were fully equipped for pretty much anything you needed. But every time we, thought we found a great place, it was way out of our price range. So cut to Van Nuys on this street called Dinsmore.
Any filmmaker offered the opportunity to shoot a film in the porn capital of America finds it irresistible, and I think Kerry was seduced by that as well.
It's basically a machine shop that, there's sawing and drilling going on next door, and you're constantly going over and saying, can you please, just cut that out, we're making a movie. There's no telling what they thought since we were in the porn capital.
It definitely was a low-budget mentality, a garage facility, and we had no frills. I mean, there was not extra money lying around for things like, lunch or a decent cup of coffee, or sometimes air conditioning, or parking. It was just a matter of every dollar was up there on the screen.
As bad as it was at points, especially that first summer where we had a severe lack of air conditioning, everyone really banded together and kind of enjoyed themselves for the most part, which was quite unusual. It's it was really this crappy little place, and yet everyone's actually having a good time out of it.
kind of became clear early on that it was something that, you know, none of us had ever done, and maybe no one had ever done. And so we just kind of had to admit that, you know, we're just going to have to do this by, you know, the seat of our pants, and hopefully it's going to work out for the best.
Whatever happens, that chip must never leave this earth.
Why? Why? What haven't you told us?
What I suggested to Kerry was to do a reading and a rehearsal about 9 months before we started shooting the movie. And the purpose of that was quite simple. One is I wanted to make sure Kerry met the actors. You know, I did all the talking with Jude, I did all the talking with Gwyneth. And then I wanted him to have a recording of it so that he could use it for the animatics that he was building for the entire movie.
What are you doing? You honestly think you're going to find something more important than every single creature on Earth being led 2 by 2 inside a giant rocket ship?
I might.
Like what?
I'll know when I see it.
Once we had that audio track, we had artists make storyboards. You could watch the whole movie with audio and storyboards and see the beginning, the middle, and the end.
What are you going to do? Shoot me?
So once that was done, and while that was in process, we took each of those scenes and took them into 3D and made 3D storyboards, basically.
I had tried to think this through as best I could from my perspective of how I wanted to approach this, which was unusual by conventional standards. And part of that was prevising the entire movie, which is to say it was sort of a low-resolution, sort of animated version of the movie. And I think this is kind of growing in popularity now. It's a great tool, particularly for a film like this that's complicated to kind of conceive, particularly when you're building so much of it from scratch.
The period in time which we're doing this movie is kind of an interesting place where the price of software and the price of hardware and you know, getting young artists in kind of could all come together, so we're going to really try to do this thing just all by ourselves. I think the technology is there to create these visions, but I think what's more rare is just the visions themselves.
The fun part of this movie was that, yeah, we were free to do a lot of things that you couldn't do in a normal film. Kerry had such an imagination and such an idea of the scale of this world. We always had a saying, if it looks too big, it's not big enough. And if it looks ridiculously big, just go a little bit more.
You have to open your mind to the ridiculous. I mean, not to say that it's ridiculous, but like he was saying, you know, how many enemies do you want in the sky? Kerry would say, well, how many do you have now? Oh, I don't know, about 150? Triple it. And then we'll look at it again, we'll probably have to double it more. And it went on. And Kevin would be right behind him saying the same thing, so it's not like you had an ally to go against.
We're going up into the lair. Kevin designed, illustrated thousands of hand-drawn illustrations. He has no idea how to design a movie as a production designer, but that didn't stop him from having this remarkable influence over the tone, tenor, and every element of the visual style. And then he and Kerry would just fight about it endlessly.
I laid on my back in here one night, and I was looking at the ceiling and the walls, and I just thought, I can't really believe I don't think I like to draw that much, and it actually produced all this stuff. If you knew going into it you were going to have to do that amount of work, I don't think any of us would have signed on for it. Professionally, my first real job, aside from a few little freelance things, was as a newspaper illustrator back home in Flint. From there, I moved to California and freelanced for a better part of a decade. And did, all kinds of stuff. Soda ads and beer ads and potato chips and album covers and just virtually anything. But the one thing I didn't do was comic books.
The advantage Kevin and I had on this film was we shared the sensibility, the same thing that the same references, the same kind of inspiration. And so when we worked together in this film, there was a bit of a shorthand language that we could speak together.
One would say, that thing, and then the other one goes, yes, I do know that, and they would instantly know what they were talking about.
It's just what you would expect from two brothers. They, didn't always see eye to eye on things. Sometimes they were perfectly in sync, and other times, there were disagreements, and when they disagreed, you knew they disagreed.
Dex's ray gun, I must have drawn 200 of them. and we couldn't agree, and we wanted to kill each other. And it was just a couple of days before we were due to shoot. We didn't even have the prop done, and we were in England. And Jon Avnet came in, and I had like my final 4 drawings, and we let him pick, and that was that. And it was, of course, remarkably similar to one of the very first drawings I ever did.
Hey, it's my gun.
I'd actually shot the movie created the movie almost 3 times before we actually ever shot a frame of film. And it was during the process when we shot the film with stand-ins in live action that we started to understand the problems that we were having, where the animatics didn't completely translate all the time to the live action. And we learned the limitations, we learned how to kind of avoid certain things. So that by the time we went to London, we fairly well knew how to make this film. And we knew that what we were doing was going to work because we'd proven it. We'd already done the shots. That allowed us to shoot the movie in about 29 days, which is quite fast, particularly for the level of complexity that we had here. And it was only through that preparation that we were able to do that.
Negative 3.8. 3.8. Yeah.
There's no substitute for experience. Film is such a kind of mystical potion. You know, it's a concatenation of so many odd elements that when it comes together and it really works, everybody's frankly confused. You know, he went in there and he took his shot, you know, in this blue world. But I think there were times that he was disappointed with what he did, and there were times when I was trying to be supportive of him and say, well, try this, and he did, and he couldn't get what he wanted, or didn't understand it, or maybe he disagreed, whatever combination. But that's actually typical for any movie. What's atypical is just how naked the stage was, and how naked everybody felt out there.
When we were in London shooting, we were shooting with a bunch of traditional filmmakers, and they had no idea what we were doing, you know, and it was very interesting working with people that, you know, they were just working on Star Wars, and now we're in there telling them what to do, and they're like, you know.
They didn't come back to LA to see these backgrounds being put in. They basically just saw all these scenes acted against a blue screen, and, you know, you could tell, even the sound guys and everyone was kind of like, well, is this really going to work? I mean, I don't know, this seems weird.
Where's the edge then when I start, where I kind of look down and realise we're...
And same with the actors. I mean, they had the animatics to look at and see, you know, these little stick figures doing certain things here and there, but at the same time, when they were actually on the stage, it was just them and this blue screen. So it took them a couple of days, I think, to really get into it, but they adapted pretty well.
Be nice.
No.
Commander Cook. Meet Polly Perkins.
I suppose, like all of us, you can dream and imagine yourself in a situation or a place, so... And actors aren't so unfamiliar with that. I think because of how bizarre the situation is, I think I've probably talked to this director more than I've talked to any other director. And, you know,
a bit more urgent looking, so are we looking everywhere?
Yeah, you can, you know, from the back.
Obviously, a director with tremendous experience walks on a set and has just a sort of cachet that the actors can believe in and believe that, hey, even if I don't understand exactly where he's going, I know that he's successfully gone and made films before that have turned out well. I'm going to trust him and go forward. Kerry had never made a movie before. He was walking onto the set with no cachet.
He's lovely. He's really shy and kind of... You always feel like when he comes up to you to tell you something, he's about to apologize to you before he says anything. Sorry. He's that kind of person.
Can you not raise up quite as much?
Just heads?
Yeah.
All right.
He's really unbelievably creative and has just amazing things going on in his brain.
It's amazing now looking at the finished film to really appreciate and to see what they did. I didn't help them. I might have been a hindrance, but the day that I was supposed to first show up on stage and shoot with Jude and Gwyneth, I probably will never forget, in fact. Someone came to get me and told me that they're ready for me. I thought, okay. I walked into this soundstage, and I'd never seen so many people in my life. At that moment, they literally, like a monster movie, all turned and looked at me. And it was almost as if the center parted, and about 100 feet away were Jude and Gwyneth, and then they turned and looked at me. And I realized that they're waiting for me. And at that point in time was probably the most sobering moment in the whole movie, where I realized, or perhaps didn't realize, what I had gotten myself into. And that was perhaps the most intimidating gauntlet I had to walk in this whole movie, where I realized I had to make it to them. I had to walk through these people and start. And along the way, I thought I had forgotten everything that we'd be prepared. I had no idea what I was going to do when I got up there. Oh, how do you begin? And that is the thing when you've never made a film before, and you're there ready to shoot a movie, and everyone's looking to you to take charge and to kind of do this. What do you say to Jude and Gwyneth as they're sitting there? What are your first words to them? That I don't remember. That's thankfully been so blocked out by the trauma that I won't have to relive it. But at the time, just walking up and kind of to get to them and begin the movie, that's when you really think about. Jude had just finished working with Steven Spielberg. Gwyneth had won an Oscar. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. And I never had the urge to turn around and run, but if I was going to, it would have been that moment. And then we started, somehow. It's just happened. And every single shot that we did that night got easier. And I think it was honestly because Jude and Gwyneth just, they kind of rescued me like a stray pup and took care of me in a way. I mean, I think that they knew that this was difficult. And as much as they were depending on me to tell them what was around them and make sure that what was eventually there would look good and wouldn't make them look silly, they were patient enough with me to kind of walk me through the steps. I don't quite know what I would have done with other actors because, I mean, that aspect of it, I'll never be able to be able to repay them for what they did for me.
One of the first scenes we shot when we got to London was Sky Captain's office. We sent that footage back to America immediately, so within a couple weeks, we actually had Sky Captain's office composited in London. And when they saw that, they were blown away that they were acting in a blue room, and now they were in an office, which is pretty amazing.
No matter, in a way, how he came off to them or how their dialogue developed, there was a really clear picture of where they were going, of the kind of movie they were making, and of what their role in it was. It was crystal clear. And I think at any time that he might have felt any sense of, being overwhelmed, perhaps, of his first time, that always was there to catch him. And that was as a result of his own hard work. All of his blood, sweat, and tears he'd poured into making the film a reality was backing him up.
How was that?